You're watching TelecomTV from the second annual TIP Summit event in Santa Clara. And I'm joined now by Bronson, who is CEO of Radisys. Brian, thanks for joining us on TelecomTV.
Thanks, Guy. Good morning.
Why is Radisys at this TIP event, the Telecom Info Project? What's your relationship with this community?
Well, we're very active in TIP, and quite frankly, many of the open source communities around the globe, our strategy has evolved over the last couple of years to work closely with these open source consortiums to help disrupt telecom networks. And so we've been partnering closely since the inception of TIP to really decompose the access side of the network. And I'll speak this afternoon more about it to the group, but so far so good. I mean, the industry's definitely changing.
Because I noticed on your booth here at the event, you're using the term open a lot here. Open's obviously very integral to your approach to the market now.
Yeah, in fact, we actually evolved our marketing messaging this fall to come out as Open Radisys. And open for us is in many dimensions. We think about open in the context of platforms. So we most recently got official approval that our hardware OCP-based platform is the de facto standard for telecom. The idea is it's low cost, it's swappable, there's few moving pieces, and it'll be huge, I think, in the industry over the next couple of years. It's also open in the context of disaggregation. If you think about separating control and user plane, hardware again and software, our skill sets are fit very uniquely with being a hardware expert, a telecom software expert, a professional services expert. There's really nobody in the industry who has that sort of coordinated background, other than obviously the traditional telecom equipment manufacturers, but what we're trying to do is to disrupt that space.
Now you're speaking here, as you said, on the future telco software stack. What do you mean by that? How do you see the software stack as evolving then?
Well, and it's a fairly generic label or tie-in to my presentation, but what really means is that we are all about designing, implementing, and then turning over, in many cases, back to the open source community, these open APIs that are key in the ability to disaggregate hardware and software in the network. And so it's easier to talk about, look, traditionally there was an EPC or a PRS gateway that was sold into a particular operator. It was closed, it was expensive, it was the hardware, software, and services from that particular telecom equipment manufacturer. Now, to disaggregate all those pieces, you need common and open APIs for all these different pieces to talk to each other, and that's really the genesis of the conversation this afternoon.
Are these open APIs the secret in a way to be able to coordinate amongst the many open source and open software communities and groups out there? Because there's a huge number of active bodies now.
Huge. So disaggregation in its simplest form is an easier concept to get your head around. Well, I mean, just take the virtual version of a RAN or a virtual version of an EPC, put it into a telecom rack, and off you go with virtualization. Well, it's much more than that, because there's a lot of different vendors that you need to interop with. There's disparate networks that you need to interop with. Frankly, there's a convergence in fixed and wireless in terms of networks that you need to be able to interop with. And so the one glue that holds that all together are things like APIs.
Are you at times surprised maybe that the telecoms operators have come together to create TIP? Because, okay, Facebook's a board member, and Facebook was integral to the formation of TIP. But look at the board now, and it's dominated by the operators. It's almost like we want to take a bit more control over the future shape of our networks.
Yeah, for a while there, I was hopeful that something like this would transpire, because it wasn't that long ago that the operators were talking about, man, I'm really tired of being held hostage by our vendors. But they were still operating in silos, so they were taking their own approach to disaggregation, and they were taking their own liberties in how to define open source. Now, by bringing all these operators together, there's a much more coordinated effort. And quite frankly, a piece of making this successful is to have a piece of each operator's points of view and their money to bring it together to help decompose and redistribute faster. I think it's going to be the difference. The other reason why it's important too is that there's a lot of the open source concepts that are still in the formative stages. The big question out for operators is, how do you commercially deploy and support these disaggregated or multi-vendor solutions. So that's a key tenet of Radisys' thesis, which is we want to be the integrator to that. But it's only going to be when these operators coordinate with each other to establish, a common framework to do, because you don't want to go back to having 15 different standards. ETSI, 3GPP, all those things need to be ironed out so you can get the scale that you want.
Just before we go, I must touch on some news you released this week, which was concerning M-Cord.
Right. Yeah, so M-Cord, or Central Office Re-Architected as a data center, we're very active, just like we are in TIP, with Cord on .lab, now called ONF. And the whole idea is to decompose the traditional network elements again. In this example, it's mobile cord, or M-Cord, and we're partnering in the announcement with Mavenir, but many other vendors to help deploy these disruptive solutions.
Great. Well, Brian, very nice to meet you, and thank you for joining us on TelecomTV.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate it.